So today we would be taking a discussion on creating a living business plan. And this would be a discussion that would be held in interaction with a professional in this area. This business plan, as we know, is a very important context in terms of running an organization. It gives two key advantages to an organization. Firstly, it gives a roadmap to the organization. The enterprise can achieve its goals, its objectives based on this business plan. And secondly, it can help the enterprise to be run in an efficient manner, in an effective manner, which ultimately gives a higher performance to the organization. To discuss about how a business plan can be created, we have with us Mr. Sandeep Khanna, an expert in this area. So Mr. Khanna has 30 years of international experience in strategy, business management, new market entry, and people development. He has been working with Shell, ICI, and the Tata Group. He is an alumnus of SRCC Delhi and FMS. Mr. Sandeep has been working in various capacities in these organizations. So he has held several leadership positions at country and global level, both within the country and abroad, basically UK. He is an active speaker on management-related topics at educational institutes, government training organizations, and corporates. So as we know, the discussion that we have to do today is about creating a living business plan. And the first question that comes in my mind, and I hope in the mind of many of you as well, what is the meaning of a living business plan? And to understand this, let's take the views of Mr. Sandeep.
Thank you, Bharti. Thank you for the introduction and for having me over. I do have a set of just 4 or 5 slides, which will help us walk through and focus the attention of all the participants. So I'd request you to just switch them on as I'm speaking on to your questions.
Okay. Sure.
I do wish that we were having a face-to-face session and I was able to meet everybody in person.
Yeah, that would have been perfect.
Yeah, because the energy, the dynamics is
definitely it's totally different.
Totally different. But anyway, we make do with the
we have to be guided by what Corona has to
that's right.
make
that's right.
us do well.
Yeah. So living, what's a living business plan?
Yeah.
Let me just firstly very briefly talk about what is a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be the most boring and unnecessary exercise, can be.
Right.
In case it is not done if it is done unmethodically, unrealistically, and without proper consultation within the organization, sometimes even outside the organization. But it is the most interesting and useful document, as you were also alluding to, if it is done properly, realistically, with real assumptions, rooted in the real world,
sure.
and with consultation. What is it? What does it reflect? So essentially, a business plan reflects your business strategy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a business, a company, or a large conglomerate, a large group, like the Shell Group, Tata Group, any of these big groups, your business plan reflects your business strategy.
Okay.
And what is business strategy? I know this is not a session on business strategy, so I will not go too deep into it, but just very briefly to touch upon what is a business strategy. Sometimes management speakers and management experts make it very esoteric. But to put it across in very simple terms, it's analyzing where we are today and where do we want to get to a year down the line, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, and how are we going to get there? That's basically it. In terms of, let's say, your portfolio of products, your market share, your profitability, competence of your people, sustainability, which is a very important topic in today's world, technology and so on. So trying to analyze where we are today in these terms, where do we want to get to, and how are we going to get there?
The future state that the organization wants to go to.
How are we going to get there?
Okay.
That's pretty much it. That is business strategy. And your business plan has to reflect some or large part of this business strategy.
Okay.
So that's what it is. In fact, the strategic management process, the same thing I've shown in two different charts over here. You do a strategic analysis, your current state, where are you today? The strategic choice you have to make because resources are limited and you have to make a strategic choice. And then it's your implementation, the strategic implementation, and it's an iterative process. It's all the time ongoing.
Yeah. So how does it become living or dynamic in nature? Say if you take the current context of pandemic, globally we have observed there are many organizations who have been not able to survive in this pandemic scenario. So how can the business plan help them? So if we use the word living business plan, so how is it called the dynamic business plan?
So here there's just a few points on what is living. So by living, I mean, when you're creating it, it's usually a consultative and an iterative process.
Right.
Now, I worked in some large organizations, but I am working with some smaller entrepreneur-driven companies as well. You have to get some kind of a bottom-up view on what is happening in the ground. Otherwise, you are setting up a business plan through in an ivory tower. Sure. And it's an iterative process. Sometimes you feel, okay, I should be able to achieve X target. I today have a market share of 10%. I can get to 20%. But then you have internal challenge and you say, okay, no, not 20%, maybe 15%. Therefore, my profitability would be, let's say, whatever, 100 crores. And then, but then you realize that you are getting into an inflationary situation and your interest rates would go up, your working capital will become costlier. So you have to adjust it. So when I say living, I mean, it's both consultative, bottom up, top, usually I say, because sometimes, especially in difficult circumstances, the top person, the chief executive, the managing director, the entrepreneur, whatever you call him, has to push down a business plan, an ambitious business plan, despite pushback, despite challenge. There's a lovely story, not really linked to a business plan, but it's more of a leadership story. In the 1860s, Abraham Lincoln, he was having this discussion with his cabinet, 5 members, on a certain bill. I think it was 1862 or 1863. And he put it to vote amongst his 5 or 6 cabinet ministers. And each one of them said, nay. As in no. So nay, 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 nay. And his response was a very famous quotation, 5 nays and 1 aye. The ayes have it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So sometimes it has to be pushed. Yeah. What more do I mean by living? It needs to be periodically reviewed. We are in a dynamic world and we've seen it in the last 2 years more than ever before, how dynamic it can be. So this is not something which is prepared, 15, 20 pages, prepared and put in the drawer. It needs to be periodically reviewed. There needs to be a contingency or a what-if plan. Business risks have to be also included in it. And you need to see, you have a sensitivity analysis that what if the interest rates were to suddenly go up? So
different scenarios can be built upon which a business plan should be tweaked accordingly.
What if there's a technological disruption? So, what is the fallback position? So that needs to also be there in the business plan. It may look 1 year ahead, 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead. But if you do it in this way, if you do it in this professional, methodical way, then I think we can call it a living business plan. Otherwise, it just becomes an unnecessary exercise.
Okay.
About the pandemic, you spoke about the pandemic. I was reading about a couple of companies the other day. There's an organization called Shri Shakti.
Okay.
I don't know if the participants are aware of this organization. They were into manufacturing and marketing kitchenware. And they had 2 or 3 manufacturing units, I think in North India, mainly in North India. And what happened after the lockdown, for several companies, including this Shri Shakti Enterprises, that their demand collapsed. people only wanted to buy necessary products. They're only buying food and those kind of only the necessities and
hygiene products
and
food items
and data and watching Netflix and all those things at home, right?
Yeah.
So so their company was pretty much on the verge of shutting down. Till the head of the organization was seeing a video, I think a YouTube video or something, and he realized that he could divert that installed capacity for which was for kitchenware into making hygiene related products like a hands-free sanitizer, like a foot sanitizer. So he moved his he had to necessarily innovate to survive, and soon he started getting orders from private organizations, from government, from ministries, from BSF, from Central Reserve Police Force, and so on. Public sector enterprises, and they managed to see through that time. Now, would this have been the business plan in 2019? I reckon not. I don't know about the company. I don't know them, never worked with them. But I'm just thinking, as others would be thinking, would this be in the business plan? I reckon not. So at times, your business plan so the main point is that there is no substitute for common sense. When you are in a situation like this, you may need to park your business plan aside and have to think on your feet, innovate. Fab India did something similar because it was a lockdown situation, but necessary products, hygiene products were allowed. So they had just 1 or 2% share of their revenue of these organic foods. And they ramped up their organic foods production and marketing. And I think today 20% or 20% or more than 20% is coming from organic foods. So now think about it. Did these companies have a business plan? They perhaps did not. Yeah. But business plan, as you were saying, it's like the headlights of a car. If you're driving at night and if your headlights are not on, it's not necessary that you will not reach your destination. You probably still would, but there's a high chance you could have an accident. There's also a high chance you get waylaid. So that's the importance of a business plan, provided it is rooted in reality.
It's well developed, well thought about the plan.
It's not over-ambitious and it's not too conservative. You've got inputs from the necessary stakeholders. And of course, it's reflecting your business strategy.
Business strategy as well. Yeah, you did deliberate about business strategy. So anything which we can say that these are the main elements of a business plan, the key elements of a business plan.
Sure.
So if our participants are thinking in terms of, say, formulating a plan for their organization, or maybe if they're thinking in terms of starting their own ventures, or in the existing organizations, suppose their organization is planning in terms of diversification or expansion in different markets. So how this business plan can be created? What are the key elements that should be kept in mind?
Okay. So let me first just briefly talk about business strategy. And then I'll touch upon the key elements. Maybe you want to switch off our video and just focus on the slide. So I think we'll get the participants to focus because it's a slightly busy slide. So my apologies for that. You can probably just switch off our video and they can focus on this. So here is let me take you back in time. Let me take you to the mid-1990s.
All right.
I presume most of the participants
must be aware about this.
Were either not born or, or they were very, very, very small. So think of mid-1990s, India had just opened up the economy, free market and all that, and a whole lot of companies were coming in. Now, think of an organization. By the way, I do have a conglomerate and a business in mind when I'm saying, when I'm showing all this. Think of an existing business in India at that time, which had operations in India and Southeast Asia. And they were they were a diversified group. They were into IT, automotive, infrastructure and realty, farm equipment, steel retail, and so on. And imagine that the young industrialist at that time picked up signals that domestic tourism and leisure was going to grow rapidly in the country. What would he, in this case he only, but what would he or she have done? What would all of you have done? So let's say you are now I know some of you might be entrepreneurs, some of you might be working in organizations. Hopefully, a lot of you will become, top management in the time to come. But think that you are in the top management of a large conglomerate, a group, not just a company, a group where there are different businesses, and this is what you pick up. So, what would you do in this situation? Okay. These are some very common sense things that I'm putting up here, Bharti.
All right.
So you would review if you have businesses in Southeast Asia, you would first review the opportunities in, let's say, India and wherever else you have your business, China, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, wherever. Then, because you have got this tip and you are convinced, you perhaps set up a leisure and hospitality business in India and you find a good chief executive. So you appoint a CEO.
Okay.
Then the group CMD, which is this industrialist, and the CEO would have to carry out an industry analysis that we want to get into leisure and hospitality. Leisure and hospitality could be hotels, it could be malls, it could be bowling alleys, it could be clubs, it could be holiday resorts, it could be cinemas, multiplex cinemas. There's so many things. Now, I'm just presupposing, I'm the hypothetical that they said that let's get into holiday resorts, because you remember, in the late 70s, early 80s, when at least now you were probably all not born, but when my parents would take me on those LTC holidays to Shimla, Mussoorie, Nainital, you had places to stay, but it was very unstandardized. Those resorts, those hotels, you were never sure what you're going to get. They were unstandardized. So they would find this as a good opportunity. Then you go ahead and appoint your functional managers, marketing, sales, engineering, finance people. And within resorts also, you can have resorts at multiple places. There's so many segments. Let's say they say we focus on jungle and river valley resorts for professionals. So your target segment is the upper segment, the professionals. It's not for
like for the elite class, the premium class.
It's not for the budget budget buyers. Then they decide to do a test market. You can't just put all your money instantly. You do a test market in one of the places. Let's say they would do it somewhere in North India. I'm constantly saying let's say because I don't know what they would have done. I'm presupposing, hypothetical. And then they would say, okay, if this is successful, then we'll spread this all over. And then we can even think of other products. We can think of clubs, we can think of bowling alleys, we can think of malls, etc. And then you would be constantly evaluating your product portfolio. Now, if you, is this moving? One moment, I'm just trying to move the slide. Yeah. Okay. Now, all these would form your contents of the business plan. All these questions we've discussed, and I hope the participants felt none of these were complex, esoteric, non-common sense. These were all very basic business sense, which you will do. This is what will go into your business plan. On the right side, what I have listed are business tools which are available, which can help you do all this. So, tomorrow, if any of the young entrepreneurs here want to actually sit down and want us to help them through a business plan, there are a lot of tools and techniques which are available. So for doing your environment analysis, you have something called political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental. You've all heard of Porter's 5 forces, which helps in analyzing the industry. There are, on every firm, there are forces. You could have a threat. You have a threat of substitutes. You could have threat of new entrants. You have bargaining power of suppliers. You have bargaining power of customers. And you have your intrinsic rivalry between the competitors. Now, if all these 5 forces are strong, your chance of making a profit is low. Right? And I'll give you an example later of an industry where all of them are strong. But you need to do this industry analysis. And perhaps that is why this group did not get into hotels, because hotels' rivalry is intense. You've got huge fixed costs. Exactly. And you are playing on, and the prices are there to be seen for everyone. Like in airlines, prices are visible. It's almost perfect competition. Prices are visible to everyone. So that's why they probably decided we get into jungle and river valley resorts. You set up an organization structure, and then you do your price positioning, your product price positioning, for which there is another tool, which is Porter's. Do you want to be cheap and cheerful? So you're offering something with others are offering at a cheaper price, or you want to differentiate and get a premium. And then, you have your portfolio metrics, the BCG metrics, the ANSOS metrics. All these are tools and techniques available which will help us do our strategic planning. And this strategic planning will largely form the contents of the business plan. Now think about it, in mid-1990s, business plan for a startup and today will be quite different. The contents will not be different, Bharti. Contents will, but the context
elements would remain the same.
The same, but the context and so for a startup, what are you focusing on? For a startup, you are focusing on how do I penetrate the market? How do I scale up? Whereas if you're a matured business today, if you're a matured business and you're getting to a stage where your product life cycle is almost in maturity or decline stage, then you are thinking, how do I extend this product life cycle? So your focus becomes different in the business plan, but your context and dimensions don't change.
So you mean to say that if you take the product life cycle, so when it is the stage of introduction, the stage of growth, the stage of maturity, and then saturation, the business plan has to be tweaked at that point of time.
Well, it is what is your strategy at that time. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
You take the case of, so we talked about this business, the bricks and mortar business. You take a digital business. In the last 2 years, I live in Gurgaon. I discovered through some neighbors that most people are ordering their morning groceries through a mobile app-based business called Milk Basket.
Okay.
Now, this Milk Basket started 4 or 5 years ago. They wanted to basically substitute, they deliver groceries and milk and all at your doorstep between 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. every morning. You have the full day to order. Now, this business started 4 or 5 years back, and it suddenly ramped up during COVID times because people didn't want to step out.
They didn't want to step out.
So think of that pestle, think of the social aspect. Yes, this company would have identified that people are looking for convenience and safety. Then, of course, a business like Milk Basket, which is now today, they've had 10, 11 rounds of financing, including debt financing.
Okay.
They've been able to get debt also, I think, whatever I read about them. Once again, don't know the people, other than I sometimes order. Then they are a digital business. So for them, in the pestle element, social is important, technology is important, digital business, payment gateways and so on, those things are important. And their business plan would focus on supplying orders. As most of the people would appreciate, these digital business, they try to value their business. It's a valuation game. They want to value it and then get equity infusion. You know who's their biggest investor today in 5-6 years' time? It's Reliance.
Okay.
Reliance is their biggest investor. So think of their business plan, a digital business plan. It would focus on elements. Elements are the same, but it would focus on different elements as compared to, let's say, this time-sharing holiday resorts company. Similarly, financial services company would focus on different elements. For them, operations are not that important, right? By operations, I mean production, supply distribution. Their business is slightly is of different nature. So depending on what your business is, the focus, the emphasis, and the stress would be different, but the elements will not change.
Okay. So that was a very nice way to explain as to what are the main contents of a business plan. And
well,
another
that was more on strategy. I can talk about contents. So I've tried to summarize. This is a summary for the participants on what exactly has to be in a business plan. What are the contents or the elements of a business plan? Well, that executive summary is actually written in the end. So it's a summary of everything else, has to be fact-based. But once again, as we just discussed in the last 15 minutes, you will start with impact of your external forces. So you do the pestle analysis, let's say a new retail company coming into India.
So just a brief description of pestle analysis for the audience.
So pestle stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental environment. So we are talking of the business environment. Now think of a retail company coming to India and they try to analyze first the marketplace. And they find that a social trend in India today, urban India, for example, is health consciousness and online buying. Increasingly, people are becoming health conscious, which I am. I'm failing though. I'm being unsuccessful. And that's why I'm happy that you hit the video. I don't want people to see my prosperity or lack of fitness rather. But you find health consciousness and on. So do you think this retail company will then get into business unless they are offering on their shelves organic and health products and online buying option? They'll not do that.
Yeah.
When I say legal, petroleum companies, at least till a few years back, I don't know, I'm a bit out of touch, they had this legal requirement that 11% of the petrol pumps, the sites or the retail sites, have to be in rural or the sort of backward areas. Now you can't set up your business plan unless you're adhering to that. Yeah. The other point is that everything has to be consistent. If this is the legal requirement, you have to adhere to it. That's the law of the land. But then you can't show a financial plan, you can't show operations.
So when you're preparing a business plan, you should always keep in mind where your enterprise has to be located, what are the legal implications if you locate it.
You start with that. Yeah. You'll start with that.
Okay.
Then you look at the industry into which you are setting up. So when you're looking at Pestle, you're looking at
external factors.
External employment, unemployment. You're in a country where there is high unemployment. Then you know that you might be able to get good workforce. If you are getting into a country with high inflation, that needs to be built. But those are the real situation for everybody. Then you look at the industry. So I was just referring to Porter's five forces. So if you think of the airline industry, it's pretty much a zero-star industry. It's the threat of substitutes is very high. You can have video conferencing. You can now you have these roads. Yesterday I was listening to the minister for roads, and you have now Delhi to Meerut you can do in 1 hour. Delhi to Bombay you'll be able to do in 12 hours. Delhi to Jaipur you can do in 2 hours, and so on.
Yeah.
Chennai to Bangalore you can do in no time.
Say around 1/4 of the distance is covered when you have to reach the airport. So if you travel by a road,
so think you
get more convenience.
If I want to set up an airline company, the threat of substitutes is high. The threat of new entrants is also very high. It's like a taxi service. There's nothing which is stopping you or me from hiring an aeroplane and putting it on the tarmac. So threat of, unlike let's say soft drinks or newspapers, it's very hard to get into that business because you need to. Who will put up a soft drink into their person, into their body, unless they're 100% sure?
Yeah.
So it's a huge upfront expenditure on brand. So and likewise, the bargaining power of suppliers, the oil suppliers, they are finite. Few of them, it's an oligopoly, and the prices they keep now they are $100 or whatever. So that bargaining power is high. Bargaining power of customers is high, and obviously when there are the barriers to entry are so low, there's an interest. There's very heavy rivalry. So here is an industry where all the forces are so strong. So how are you going to? So your business plan will have to reflect this harsh reality. If I go to an airline company and they call me for doing some strategic analysis, and then they show me a financial plan which is showing a return on investment of 20%, that's it for me. I'll say no. How is this possible? So it all has to be consistent. So if I just go down this list, you look at your competitors and you have to mirror the competitor's strength and weakness with your own strength and weakness. Mission. Now again, if you read business books, there is a lot of what is mission, what is vision, what is this? Yeah. It's confusing. But mission is why are you in business? Basically, the company where I used to work earlier, Shell, their mission was to power progress together using new and clean energy sources. Okay. So it's as simple as that. And the business strategy, again, 10 odd years back when I was there, I don't know now, was more upstream, profitable downstream. By more upstream, I mean more production. And by downstream, it's refining and marketing. So refining and marketing focus only on those markets where you get a certain threshold level of return, but you need to focus on production. That's what it meant. In case, and you'll find, and I find this when I talk to my friends, colleagues, associates, in most companies, the executives, the VPs, GMs, salesmen, and so on, they cannot articulate the strategy of their organization in a simple way.
Yeah.
So if your business managers cannot articulate your strategy in one simple statement, nobody else can. So it's so important that this is very clear. Core competence. Using the same example, core competence of the traditional oil companies, the Shell, Exxon Mobil, BP, Chevron, Texaco, and so on, was producing and marketing energy products, the black products. But about 25 years back, they all started getting into convenience stores. You've seen these convenience stores at petrol stations, which are selling ice creams and tobacco products and milk and
Some
magazines and all that.
So if you go
Only for them to realize that that was not an area of core competence for them. And therefore, we found in the last 15-20 years, they've been hiring this out to the traditional grocery retailers. So in UK, you'll find BP, for example, if you're traveling in UK, they have collaboration with Marks and Spencer. So you have a BP petrol station, but the shop is M&S. Shell had with Sainsbury's. Somebody had with Tesco's. So you hand over that particular sub-business to an organization whose core competence it is. All this must reflect in your business plan. Then, of course, marketing and sales plan, we already spoke about. You have to be very clear, what is your target segment? How are you positioning your product? And we spoke about that tool which is available, which I think anybody who's done simple business management would know, which is Porter's generic strategies. So do you want to be cheap and cheerful? Or do you want to differentiate? Or do you want to have a niche focus? You have to be very clear. In this case, that case study we just talked about, they focused on the upwardly mobile segment, which is the professionals, and they focused on the holiday resorts in river and jungle and river valleys. That's what the very clear focus. So everything else will flow from that. Pricing and all will flow from that. Hyundai is a cost leader. BMW is a differentiator. Tata Nano, when they came, I don't see any cars now they're probably not there, but when they came, they had focused, it was a niche cost leadership, focused on the first time buyer, the person who was graduating from the two-wheeler to the car. It was focused on that. And Ferrari is also a differentiator, but it is very focused. It's meant for that, the real who want to exhibit power. And so on. And then comparative advantage. Now, this is something I'll tell. I said upfront, there is no substitute for common sense. Bharti, whether it's you or me, our friend here, your institute, any organization, every day you have to ask the question, why should people come to us? Why should people come and study here? Why should people buy this car? Why should I buy this bottled water? Why? What is it that? So what is your competitive advantage? Competitive advantage is nothing but something which is different in you.
Some core capabilities which an organization
What is it that differentiates you and which others don't have in the same measure? McDonald's is a cost leader. They have standardized their competitive advantage is standardization and cost for McDonald's. Apple, it is innovation. My son, he studied in an IB school and used to buy those ID books. That was their core competence. That company was printing only IB curriculum books. So they were focused over there. So it's very important that we know why our customers going to come to us. What is your competitive advantage? Then for some companies, operational plan. Obviously, as I mentioned, financial services may not be, but for traditional manufacturing marketing companies.
Yeah, this is important.
What people do you have to deliver this plan? Who is going to deliver it? Do you have the skill set in your organization to who can
procure the raw material or inputs
in an economic manner? Who can market the product? You have the best of month. So what is your organization structure? Then, of course, your financial plan, where everything hooks into it. So your income statement, your P&L, your balance sheet, cash, very important. Nothing is, if there's anybody who's in any kind of doubt, please ask me. I can tell you what is most important in an organization is not profit. It is cash. That's why your working capital is most important. That's why people used to say that you have to sell and get that money back so that you can fund your, so cash is most important. And your return on, obviously, your return on investment. The new companies, the digital companies, funding requirements. Maybe the example we used of this holiday resorts company, they were internally funded. But a lot of our friends, a lot of the participants here might be either setting up or working in digital businesses where funding requirements are important. So that must show in your business plan. And finally, your business risks, which we talked about in the beginning also. What if scenarios? So these are the contents or elements of a business plan. If all these are fleshed out properly with consultation in an iterative process, they are properly reviewed, then we have a living business plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and as I said, it has to be consistent across contexts.
Yeah.
You cannot talk about a legal environment, a legal policy in Pestle and not reflect that in your financial plan. You cannot say that I'm a zero-star industry and is highly competitive and say my ROI is going to be more than 20%. So it has to be consistent across contents, and all these elements have to be smart. So they have to be specific, they have to be measurable. Some people call it attainable, but I prefer to call it ambitious, but realistic. Okay. If it's not ambitious, how are you stretching yourself? But at the same time, it cannot be, you cannot be in phantom land, no? You cannot say that I'm going to triple my market share when your competitors are very strong. You can't do that. So it has to be ambitious but realistic, and it has to be defined in terms of time. So if I may, that's why it would have been wonderful if we were all face to face. We could have had a chat on which part of the business plan is most important.
So definitely, I'll request all my audiences to post their queries on the chat mode. So the last 15-20 minutes, we will take whatever queries you have in your mind before winding up with the session. Now, the next thing that comes in the mind is...
Just let me answer this, Bharti. Yeah. Which part of the business plan is most important? Now, we could have this debate and everyone might be right. But the way I see it, I look at the financial plan. Because everything hooks into the financial plan. Every line item of the income statement, starting with your sales, your price, your inbound raw material cost, your direct costs, your indirect costs, overheads, everything you should be able to defend. If any of you are making a business plan and you're going to your supervisor, you're going to your manager or going to the chief executive, you ought to be able to defend every single line. Every single line of that P&L balance sheet and cash forecast is coming out of the qualitative, if I can call it qualitative. So that to me is the most important part of a business plan.
All right. Okay, that was explained in a very illustrious manner, Mr. Sandeep. Now, next thing that comes in the mind is who all would be interested in this business plan in the organization? Is it just the organization? Is it some external stakeholders as well that should be referring to this business plan?
So I think most important, I put on this slide also, who needs a business plan? I mean, firstly and most importantly, it is the organization itself. Yeah. The business plans are generally driven by the top management. You call them board of directors, managing director, entrepreneur, whatever you call them. Yeah. But it's driven by them. What a business planning exercise does, and a living business planning exercise definitely does, is it necessarily makes the top management think about scanning the environment on a regular basis and reviewing their own strengths and weaknesses mirrored against the competitors. It forces you to do that. It forces you to periodically do a strategy appraisal. You see, no competitive advantage ever lasts for a lifetime. You have to be constantly, and the whole purpose of business strategy, the whole purpose of business strategy is nothing but pursuit of competitive advantage. Why should a customer come to us? Why should anybody buy from me? Why should you buy my mutual fund? Why should you order your groceries through my app? Why should you buy clothes from my retail store? So, sorry. So it forces the top management to periodically do a strategy appraisal.
And definitely, it is the objective of each organization to create a sustainable competitive advantage. So how they can sustain their enterprise, they can scale up the enterprise as required with a change in the dynamics.
So as we said, it's the headlights of a car. It gives you direction, it gives you control. Otherwise, you don't know. If you are just flying blind, you don't know what market share you're pursuing, how many holiday resorts do you want in 5 years? You say you did one test market, you want 10 or 20. Let's say you want 20. Now you're only at 10. At least it gives you control that we are falling behind. So it gives you a lever, it gives you direction and control. Then, of course, you use it for performance evaluation, because this business plan, and that's the next point, it goes down to the business heads. So think of this conglomerate we spoke about. They'll have a steel head, they'll have a vice president IT, they'll have a vice president automotive, they'll have a GM for, so they talk that business plan, and presumably the business plan is set up with their inputs. But then it ultimately percolates down to their target. They are the ones who have to achieve it. And they in turn will then use it for going to, for percolating these targets down to their employees. So the chief executive of holiday resorts will have, he or she will have targets for the finance person, will have targets for the salesperson, will have targets for the marketing person. It all percolates down to them. So the most important thing is that who needs a business plan? Firstly, it's the top management itself, and it is your business heads and down to every employee.
Okay.
Now you'll find in some of these large companies, who have 3-4 lakh people, it cannot.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that a good professional group, every individual would know broadly what they are expected to achieve. Broadly, what they're expected to achieve. And that in turn rolls up to the top line, which is a business. So that's one group. Second group, of course, is the bankers who have to give you debt.
So the first group is basically the
company itself. Most
Yeah.
important, you need a business plan for yourself.
Yeah, it's a roadmap for
A roadmap for myself.
Yeah.
I need headlights for myself
Sure.
because I want to get from destination A to destination B. In fact,
Definitely.
one of my old chief executives in Shell, his autobiography was titled My A to B. That's it.
Okay.
My A to B. I am at point A. I need to get to point B. Business plan is a tool which is going to help me direct my team, control, monitor, reward the good performers in getting from point A to point B. And getting from point A to point B is nothing but your business strategy.
Definitely.
As we said, where are you today? Where do you want to get to
Tomorrow.
in 3 to 5 years' time? So that's the first group, Bharti. Second is the bankers, which is for your debt financing or loans, obviously for whether it's a long-term loan or working capital. The banker needs to see what is the project you have. So you need to give the business plan to them to show them that your project is robust.
Robust in nature.
And then you have the equity. So you basically your funds are going to be either debt or equity. So then you have your equity investors, which could be a venture capitalist or PE investor who might need it for equity financing. It could be the market analyst or the fund manager for making investor recommendations. Now in UK, in London, they have something called the City. City is nothing but the bankers and the analysts.
Okay.
So often companies over there say that the City is giving us a thumbs up for this, or the City is giving us a thumbs down for
this project.
But the City, which is nothing but these analysts and these market analysts and bankers and all, are essentially seeing how you are performing over the last few years, and whether or not you're meeting your stated business plan. So a lot of elements of the business plan are in public domain. A lot of it may not be, which could be, obviously your cost structure and all that is not in public domain. But a lot of the things are in public domain. Your revenues are in public domain, your market cap, which market you're entering, which business you're entering and exiting. So the market analysts or so that's called the City. So if you need it for them. And then of course, and in the long run, if you want to have get listed, then in a way, the stock market would also need. So these, I think, are the stakeholders. And the point is that the same business plan can be tweaked depending on who it is being presented to.
Yeah.
So some of
that is definitely an important requirement when you have to present it to a stakeholder.
Yeah, so for the banker or the say market analyst is not interested in knowing that in which state of India how much are you selling.
Yeah.
But they are interested to know how much is going to be your turnover. That they are interested in. So you can tweak it. But the people who are starting, people like me who were starting many years ago, a lot of our friends on the call who are right now state level managers or whatever they call them, branch managers, area managers, for them it's very important to know how much we are selling in my state. Right? So the same business plan can be tweaked depending on who it is being presented.
And the last thing that I would request you to deliberate upon is that you have been working with Shell for a very long time period and other corporates. So any interesting anecdotes, any kind of issues that were faced in your organization when this business plan was to be created, which can be a guide to our audience?
So, Bharti, on that, I can speak for about 24 hours, especially in the evening over a beer, because there are so many stories. But I think we have about 5-7 minutes before we open it up.
Okay.
So I've got just a few things to say. One is that you can use this business planning exercise as a team building exercise.
Okay.
So you've heard of this term called off-site meetings. So a lot of companies in December or January will have an off-site meeting. Go to a Kathmandu or a Thailand or a Dubai or one of these places, or to Goa or Cochin or some nice place, sit in a hotel. The entire top class team is there, and you do a hot house, which means you build the full business. Well, you use it for team building as well. That's one. Secondly, issues and anecdotes. Sometimes, the person who's making the business plan wants to project dynamism. This is all human psychology. Okay. They want to impress certain stakeholders. That look how ambitious and bold I am. I'm suddenly going to have a 25% share of the market.
All right.
Yeah. So a more experienced and seasoned manager would need to check that. Okay, great. I give you full points for your boldness, but is it really real? Who are you going to take market away from? That you're going to run up to 25%. So that's something which. Then if you talk about anecdotes, the very, when I found, and I won't tell you who, won't tell you where, but sometimes when the business managers, they want to have a conservative target, so they can show overachievement. Especially if my bonus, if my promotion and reward is linked to that, I want to show I have double achieved by.
Let me take an analogy. Suppose we talk about economic planning that took place in our country. So the initial 2, 3, 5-year plans that we had in our country, the targets had to be achieved were quite high. And later it was realized, no, this has to be tweaked in terms of the realistic achievement, realistic targets. So the next set of 5-year plans took into account the achieved target in the last 5-year plan. And on that basis, they build up on the next 5-year plans.
So, I've had managers in my team, when they knew that I was visiting their particular town, city for this exercise, in the evening, they'll say, let's take you to a very nice restaurant.
Okay.
So the best restaurant, and they want to buy, have the best of food and best of drink, because next day, we are going to discuss the business plan. And they want to have slightly conservative business plan so that life is easy. So this is something which happens, which people need to be aware of. Then, if you link your rewards only to plan numbers, that can become tricky at times. There are like, for example, this example itself of what the Sri Shakti did. There was no business plan to get into, but who did that innovation? Who came up with that idea? Who was able to think on their feet? You need to reward that as well. Okay. So it's not then your people skills. It's your ability to scan the environment. It's your ability to handle difficult situations, your management skills. Now, all that may not necessarily be in your business plan, but that cannot be overlooked. Yet we want to have as smart objectives as possible to make the process an objective one. But we have to be careful that your rewards, bonuses, promotions is not linked only to numbers. It ought to be, but not only and only to. So there's something. Then you have this very situation of I just put it in my words. You feign pain on a Wednesday because you want to take leave on Friday. So if, let's say, by middle of the year you realize that you cannot achieve your plan, then you start telling a manager, market bahut kharab ho gayi hai. Market has become very tight, sir. Abhi jo
competition बढ़ गया है.
Competition बढ़ गया है. या सर मैंने ऑर्डर किया था, मेरे को जो मटेरियल आना था फैक्ट्री से वो आया नहीं है, टाइम से नहीं आ रहा, बताओ मैं क्या करूं? How do I achieve? So you start building this ground preparing for failure. So this is something which happens in real life. And then I used to experience this thing in one of my jobs that, my colleagues at my level, if I was I didn't always overachieve. Some only rarely I did. But when I was overachieving, I found that the other colleagues would always say that इनके तो targets ही बहुत आसान है. These targets are very simple. So they are telling my boss that, अच्छा, you only have to sell whatever 1,000 units. So that's easy. That you I think you've already done it. So so these are all of Bharti, the few issues and anecdotes which are related to business plan.
So I hope our audience would have got a brief understanding about what is a business plan, what is the requirement of a business plan, its elements, and to whom it should be presented or for whom it should be created. So now let's take a set of questions. If you have any, you can ask our expert the questions that you have. Yeah.
Video kar dijiye. You have questions on chat?
Let us see the chat and pick the questions that have been posted. How taxes in the present times are impacting the business plans?
Well, it's part of, as I said, it's part of your legal. It's a requirement. It's a legal requirement. So when you're making your financial plan, you have to show your pre-tax and post-tax. You need to do that. So this, of course, is a legal requirement. But then it also begins to impact, let's say, indirect taxation. So if your tax regime is not stable, then you will have a shaky business plan. You never know. But if it is stable, it doesn't impact your business. It might impact your sale. It might impact your demand. Let's say your GST is being hiked up, or it's called VAT in some countries. If your VAT, is being increased from 20% to 25%, obviously your demand is going to come down. So that will need to reflect in your business plan. So it's a legal requirement. It will impact not so much the creation of a business plan, but it will lead to impact in demand, positive or negative. If you're reducing your corporate tax, for example, you can plow back that money into R&D, you can plow it back into innovation, you can plow it back to your employees. So it will reflect positively. Whereas if you're in an uncertain tax regime, or if you're in a high tax regime, then that's going to impact your, the demand.
Vikas has a question. Please let me know how to know market potential of certain items.
Well, market. So this is again, it's a pretty vast topic. When you say market potential, one is your market size. Now it depends on the item. There are certain products where it's very easy to know the market size. Automobiles in India, for example, fertilizers in India. Oil consumption. These are where you have so much of industry bodies and you have government bodies and the statistics are available that you know what the market size is. But equally, there are product areas which are disorganized. So
the first thing which Vikas needs to do is, to decide what kind of a product you are trying to venture into, and thereby look into the.
But it's a very good question, because I have found so many young executives, young managers, they have no idea about size of the market. So Vikas, if your question is size of the market, I know you're talking potential, but size of the market, you have in many cases organized industries, official statistics which are available. But those need to be then married with what is happening in the ground. And there are always ways to do it. You talk to your distributors, you talk to the employees in that company, and you get. Market potential is a different thing. Market potential is where is it going to go to? Where is it going to grow? And that is a skill. It's both an art and a science. Because let's say I've seen this market grow by 10% and I know its current size. Now, will it only grow by 10%? Or is there something happening, some disruption happening, which is on the horizon, which is going to impact this? Now, for example, this your demand for data. Did anybody know when they had done this demand for data in 2018-19, they would have taken some kind of a trajectory. Who knew that this black swan event would happen and the demand, I don't even know, I'm not in that industry, would have doubled, tripled? What would have happened to business, to the market potential? But this is a question which should be in everybody's mind in whichever industry. You must know the size of the market because it tells you how to grow, where to grow. And then your market potential becomes both an art and a science. You can look back and see the trajectory. You can look forward into the horizon and see what is going to happen, which is going to, like when you're talking of New India, there was this demand for housing suddenly spotted 15, 20 years back. Now, would people have really seen this potential? I'm not sure, but I'm sure the astute professionals in the reality space might have seen that the disposable income is going up. Indians have this need to own a house, at least own a house. Today, what is happening? The millennials. My son is one. I'm sure a lot of people here would be. They don't want to own anything. They don't want to own the house. They want to lease it. They don't want to own a car. They want to lease it. Some don't even want to have a family.
Yeah, that's a sharing economy which has collaborative consumption that has become quite popular in the current.
Yeah, you have your partner, and that is the real world. So what happens to the market potential of housing, cars over there? It will change. Very important question, but sorry, I've given a roundabout answer. I hope it kind of gives you a sense of what I was saying. Vikas is the name, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, call me. We'll chat about it.
Not everyone may be involved at a company level plan. How do we utilize the framework for a sizable department?
That's quite right. Not everybody would be involved, but everybody in a large company ought to be involved. And that's what I meant by a living business plan. There has to be some bottom-up inputs which you would give. So if I'm running a company, I might have my core skills might be strategy and marketing. I may not understand production. Now, how do I fix targets for production if I need to take inputs from them? So if I've not taken inputs, then to that extent, my business plan is not a robust one. Having said that, there are times when the going is tough, these pandemic kind of times, where the chief executive has to just, push through a target. So in that case, yes, you may not take inputs, but otherwise you ought to have inputs from every big department. Otherwise, where is the ownership? You've given me a target and I tell you that, sorry, sir, I can't do this. I mean, I don't know who has told you that I can, my installed capacity is, let's say, 50,000 cars. You're saying you manufacture 75,000. How will I do it? You didn't take those inputs. If you'd taken inputs, I would have said, okay, maybe I can stretch it to 55. How do it? So for the buy now, if you've had a consultation with me, we can perhaps challenge, discuss, debate, iterate. And then, and then forward, but that has my ownership. That will have my ownership. Otherwise, there's no ownership.
Because again, has to mention order in which we should move getting a startup while planning.
So, order in which we should move getting. So, because as I said, my first statement that a business plan is not necessary for success. All these examples I gave you of companies which went into innovative products, they probably didn't have a business plan. So it starts, the germination is with an idea. It's not with a business plan. The starting point is always the idea.
Idea generation.
But then you need to force yourself to articulate it, put it down on paper, because when you are doing that, you are then looking at, to the previous question, what is the market size?
Market potential.
What is the statistics showing? So, it starts with the idea and then it moves into the business plan.
Preeti has a question. Should you approach a business plan consultant? What points to keep in mind while hiring one? How much one should budget for this activity?
Well, it helps to have a facilitator for external challenge. It's not necessary. If you have a team which is
equipped with preparing the plan, so
of good managers who understand the market. But what I found helped us also, we would have a facilitator with us. So he or she would challenge us, would make sure we are sticking to the process. Sometimes they would take out the clash which happens between managers. And I give you some anecdotes. So it helps to have a facilitator, an experienced facilitator.
The second part is, so how much budget for this activity?
How much one should budget for this activity? Well, I don't know what how exactly to answer. Well, see,
not much can be said about it.
As I said, it's an ongoing activity. You have to be reviewing it periodically. So, if you are an established business where you've been doing this kind of, you don't need to budget much. What do you need to budget? Let's say you're taking 2 days off. You're taking 2 days off for a business planning exercise. You're going to for an offsite meeting. That's your budget basically. What more?
Yes,
There's nothing more. But in case you've not done this activity and you're doing it for the first time, obviously you need to have more time, more energy, more resources to it.
Sumit again has a question. How can someone factor in macroeconomic conditions, example, global uncertain situations, pandemic, etc., realistically in a business plan?
So that's where you start your business plan from. Who can, Sumit, who can factor in a black swan event? Did you know that did we know that there's going to be a Russia-Ukraine war? We didn't know that. Did we know that the price of oil will go to $120? Everybody was saying $60, $70. We didn't know that. No, who knew about what is this monkeypox coming these days? No, this is nature which is hitting us in different ways. What you can do is the macroeconomic, which you understand, which I mentioned initially, the pestle. You take that into account.
So you can take into account, say, if you have to start your business, say, in US or in a European country. So what is the kind of economic framework that they have?
Just one more.
You can definitely not factor in terms of a natural
what you can do, Bharti and Sumit, is to have a diversified business. That's not just to do with business planning.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a business strategy.
Diversified in terms of portfolio, diversified in terms of markets as well.
Yeah. So,
things.
if one business is hit, at least some other businesses are keeping you afloat.
Yeah.
That diversification, and that's why a lot of companies do that. So Marks and Spencer, they're into apparel retailing. They're also into foods today. You have these big groups like Tatas and Mahindras, which are into more than 20 businesses. Oil companies are both into production and they're into marketing, and they're getting increasingly into natural gas, and they're getting into renewables, and they're getting into power. So you're trying to diversify because you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. Because when some events you can foresee, some events you cannot foresee.
Definitely. It's not just the natural calamities. Say if you go back in history, there was this global economic crisis of 2008.
Yeah.
Or if we have a recession. So again, recession, none of the countries would want to be in a state of a slowdown. But definitely you cannot just control these factors.
What you can do is, that there are business cycles.
Yes.
So if you are sitting on a boom, you know that boom is not going to last forever.
Yeah.
So you need to be prepared for downturn.
Yeah, definitely. The similar example can be given to this real estate.
Yeah,
Vikas has a question. Let's say real estate. Sir.
Yeah.
So again, real estate is the same scenario.
It goes through these booms and
but there are certain industries in which we can say that there is a 3-year cycle. So after every 3 years, there may be a recession in that particular industry. So there are certain industries who are prone to recessions after a specific time period. But generally, again, no one can predict or forecast. So when a kind of a slowdown would emerge in the industry.
It can be tricky.
Definitely, the economists also take out certain factors, say how much is the index of industrial production and various other factors to just indicate what the future state can be in that industry. But definitely, we cannot with surety predict or forecast.
But there are indicators, Bharti.
Yes, indicators.
So for example, if now inflation is going up, we know that for the foreseeable future, if this is the trend, if the Russia-Ukraine conflict is not abating, oil prices will remain high, imported inflation will remain high, therefore interest rates will go up, therefore demand for products like housing, cars, etc. will be low because mortgage rates and all will become high. So these are things which you can predict. Just one point to some who would raise the question on business size and market size and market potential.
That was because
so you can really link it to real estate. If you see the statistics today, you find that
Vikas has put up another question. So where are those statistics available?
It depends on which industry. So let me just complete that point. If you see, a lot of urban areas of India are overbuilt today. You go to some parts of Bangalore, you find it is overbuilt.
Definitely, even in the Delhi NCR region,
you find it is overbuilt. So what will happen to your prices? Now the question is, where do you get these statistics? Now I'll give you an example. Let's say you're talking about fertilizers. You have Fertilizer Association of India in the Qutub institutional area. They'll tell you everything about acreages in India, cropping patterns, NPK kind of fertilizers and so on. You have Ministry of Fertilizer. You have an annual publication which comes out. So that's where you can get for fertilizers. But for certain things, say glasses, eyeglasses, I don't know where to get it. I've never worked in it, but I don't know where to get it. Automobile, you can. Automobile Association of India. So for industries, as I was saying earlier also, Vikas, which are matured, which are organized, you have these sort of bodies which are constantly surveying and publishing statistics. But if you're in an unorganized industry, then it gets more difficult.
I just take a few more questions. Actually, just wanted to understand if there is some official numbers linked, or just take ballpark.
Well,
number.
You should avoid ballpark as far as possible, unless, as I said 2 times already, you're in an unorganized sector. Otherwise, everything has to be, you should go by official statistics, but do compare them with what's happening in the market. So, you might have an official publication coming from fertilizer industry saying that it is growing at 7-8%. But when you talk to the farmer or you talk to the distributor, they say, no, it's not selling these days. So you must compare it with some empirical example.
ऊपर का कुछ छूट गया question इसके पहले. Right. So how to deal when clear business plan does not exist or not clear from top to bottom?
Well, it's
Anurag's question.
So you're driving without headlights, it means. You're driving. What you do in that case, Anurag, is see your previous year performance. At least show growth in that. Your GDP is growing at 7-8%. Your population is growing at 1%. Obviously, whichever industry you're in will grow at some rate, unless you're in a recession. It is going to grow. So if you don't have a business plan, at least let that be a steer for you.
Another question which has been put forward by Arun. Contingency plan is plan B or a plan which is planned after the failure?
Where is that written?
This is yeah.
Contingency plan is plan B or a plan which is written plan. No, it is well, you can call it whatever, plan B, plan C, etc. But it is a fallback option. So for example, if I am sensing that there is likely a discussion is going on international retail. I don't know where we are now today, but that was a very hot discussion a few years back, that the government is likely to allow multi-brand international retailers into India. Now you must take that into account in your planning. Let's say you are a Haldiram or you are a Bikaner wala, and you are going food retailing, savory retailing, etc. Or you are a Reliance store and you are into grocery retailing. So you need to take this account that this is on the horizon.
Yeah. So
that must become your fallback option, contingency plan or plan B or whatever you want to call it. What you do after the failure is why should you assume that you are going to fail?
No, when we talked about sensitivity analysis or scenario planning, Arun, then we think about all certain such scenarios. If there is a slowdown or if there is an unforeseen circumstance, then how should the company go ahead? So that kind of a planning can be done. So when you talk about alternate plans.
So let us say you are you're doing project appraisal for a project, and you are taking a certain rate of discounting, which is the interest rate. So what is going to be your internal rate of return if you are discounting your future cash flows at say 8%? Now you must have a sensitivity analysis to say, what if it is 12%? Am I still profitable? You must know that. So you know that's the risk which you can take.
I hope this is clear, Arun. If you still have a doubt, you can post your query again. Now, Amol has to mention, thanks for this wonderful session, enjoyed it. Sometimes business plans are overwhelming when you are starting out. Some successful companies did not have a business plan when starting out. What is a good starting point for a business plan and time, and how concise a business plan is acceptable?
The good time is now. Any time is a good time, Amol. There is no bad time for it. As I said, think of it in simple way. Where are we today? Where do I want to get to? IMT, how many students do you have today? How many campuses do you have today? Where will you be next year from now? Any time is a good time. This is a regular process. It's an iterative
Ongoing
process. It's an ongoing
yeah.
process.
I hope that is
What is a
clear.
good starting point for a business plan, and time, and how time? I told you that there is no time.
How concise a business plan is acceptable?
It's once
so the
again,
main elements should be kept in mind. The elements were described by you in detail.
Absolutely.
I hope you have gone through the session very carefully, Amol. So please keep in mind those key elements that were shared by the expert.
So let us say you want to set up a resort. Look at it is how detailed you want to get to. It should be, but don't lead too much analysis, should not lead to paralysis. That I'll warn you against. But you must get down to a level of detail which is actionable. You can't say, okay, I'm going to set up one test market, one resort today, and then if it is successful, I'll do one next year. Where will you set up this resort? Who is going to run it? Where is the money going to come from? Who is it targeted towards? How will you test market it? What is your definition of success? How much cash flow do you want out of it? All that has to be defined. At least though that needs to be in your business plan. At least that much needs to be in your business plan.
Exactly. Himanshu has a question. I have seen mission statement of various companies overlaps. How to have a different mission statement from others?
Don't let this become. Don't let this overwhelm you. If you have a strong idea, Himanshu, your mission statement will automatically come out of it. This example that I just gave you of milk basket. What do you think their mission statement is? The mission statement is to become the mom and pop store for at least 1 million households. It's as simple as that.
If you are charged up with your idea, then everything flows accordingly.
But the thing is, if you cannot articulate a mission, then you are in trouble. Because then you don't know. Then you are stuck. Then as in that Michael Porter language, then you are in the muddle. If you cannot define it why exactly you're in business, then you are in the muddle. Then that's a bit, a bad situation to be in.
All right. And Hindol has to mention in a test analysis, what percentage does political analysis contribute? But it surely plays a very important role in the monetary policy plans.
No, it's a very good question.
Yeah, definitely. There's a link between politics and economics.
So when you very kindly introduced me, Bharti, you said I had done some new market entries. So I have done this new market entry work in many countries around the world. In Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Syria, Morocco, Australia, many countries. Now it depends which country. If you're talking of Western Europe, or you're talking of matured economies where there's an established rule of law, this is not that important, political situation. But you think of those newly independent countries,
emerging economies of the world.
So I went to one country where
Uzbekistan and all these emerging economies.
There was one country I went to where everything was based on presidential decree. So the president would tell you whether or not you can set up this business or no. Now that's a damn dicey situation, because the day the president gets unhappy or doesn't like your face, your decree is withdrawn. There the political becomes very important. Even in emerging economies like like India and all, political situation is important because it's determining your policy.
Very rightly said.
But in industrialized countries, in stable economies and mature democracies, it may not be as important as it is
in the emerging economies. Rakesh has a question: how to deal when clear business plan does not exist or not clear from top to bottom? And there are situations.
I think we covered that. Huh? We just covered that.
Okay, so that was covered.
There's something on the investors.
Yeah, where investors are not involved in the business plans and but want to control the operational decisions.
Yeah, so there it is. It helps you. It helps giving you direction, control, etc. You may not need it for investors, but you need it for yourself.
How do we do demand analysis while creating a business plan of regular commodity, say bread, for example?
How do you do a demand analysis?
Demand analysis.
So yeah, I mean, this is again, you need to sit for a long time, and I can tell you how to do a demand analysis.
So you can take the previous year data and then forecast projections, make projections on the previous year data. And
how will IMT do their demand prediction, Bharti? For
Yeah.
example, you take your previous prediction.
previous year data. You
You see what is happening in the environment.
Yeah.
We talk about this term called demographic dividend. You have a young workforce. They want to be professionally qualified, and therefore there is need for professional management
So
education.
that is for an existing product. Say suppose you want to launch a new product, then in that case, again you have to go ahead.
If you're launching a new product, but in an industry which is well established, then it's one thing. But if you're getting into what is called a new area, totally blue ocean, there it's a completely different ball game.
How do we? So that's done. How can we differentiate from successful?
Now, just bread, for example. I talked about health consciousness. If you are coming in, firstly, most important question today, all the time, what is your competitive advantage? Why should I buy bread from you, Arka? Why? So you need to have a reason.
Yeah, not bread made with wheat, maybe bread made with the.
So is it a differentiated product?
In nature?
Is it a differentiated product, or are you getting some locational advantage?
So,
let us say you are the first store.
Made from barley, maybe any other such thing that can entice the consumer.
That's a product differentiation.
Yeah.
Or are you selling it cheap, so I'll buy it from you?
Right.
Do you have a locational advantage? Let us say there's a new housing township which is coming up, and there is no store there, so you set up there. Then I'll definitely come to you. So why? What is your competitive advantage? Once you know that, other things follow.
How can we differentiate from the successful competitors in market? That has already been explained because with the example taken right now about bread. What is
and cars and everything else
of a business plan should be updated, and is it possible to write a business plan without any specialist assistance? I think Ria, this was already discussed initially.
It's common sense, Ria.
Preeti had also put up this question.
A facilitator, as I said, helps. If you can get help from an experienced person, there's nothing to lose in that. But it is not something which is where you're writing an algorithm of that movie. What was that movie? Mangal. So it's not as difficult as going to Mars. If I'm selling, let's say, eyeglasses, I'm selling water or anything. If I have basic common sense, I should be able to do it. But it helps to get inputs from colleagues. It helps to get challenge from colleagues. It helps to have a facilitator. All those things help. Soon you become, yourself become competent in doing it.
So if last set of questions, any one of you who wants to put up a question, you can post it on the chat mode. Otherwise, I think we can call it a day. And definitely, I would thank Mr. Sandeep for sharing his expertise and his experience. I know this August gathering would have really got certain key insights on how to create a living business plan. And we will continue with these series in future as well. We'll come back with certain expert sessions more in the future time period. So all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Bharti. Thank you, everyone. Hope to meet you someday.